Now we go on to my favorite tool, free indirect speech. I could talk about this all day, every day. So free indirect speech is a beautiful tool that comes into play when you're writing a third person past tense, which is the most common narrative structure. Now, obviously, it is not the only narrative structure, it's just the most common. When you're using the term free indirect speech, when editors use that term, we're talking about third person past tense. So you have essentially, without free indirect speech, you've got two ways to report a character's thoughts when you're in third person past tense. One is indirectly, like Ray kept forgetting about practice despite feeling awful about it. That is kind of a wide distance view. You're telling us he kept forgetting. You're just interrupting with information about what his thoughts are. But that's fine. It's not like you can't ever do that. But if you have a lot of that going on, you're going to want to fix that. That's indirectly giving his thoughts. Now, directly giving his thoughts can come in one of two ways. It can be, he actually says them out loud and we've got dialogue. Sorry, I keep forgetting practice. I feel awful, Ray said, right? Or you have italics and it's now a thought. Crap, I forgot practice. I feel awful, but I bet the guys don't believe me. Now, you don't have to have both italics and Ray thought, by the way. I could have had just the italics or I could have had just the Ray thought. But because you're writing in third person past tense, and now his direct thoughts need to be in first person, you have to have some sort of indication, otherwise it's jarring. But that's the beauty of free indirect speech, because you actually stay in third person, but it's still a direct report of their, it's not indirect, which you should use like sparingly, because indirect doesn't immerse us in the character as much as direct does. So you get to use direct, but without having full-on quotation marks, because we don't always say our thoughts out loud, or constantly having italics, or constantly having the word he thought. Here's free and direct speech. Crap, why did he always forget practice? Ugh, of course he felt awful, but doubt the guys believed him. These are his thoughts, seamlessly blended into their narration, third person. Okay, so I'm not indirectly saying, oh, he kept forgetting. I'm not indirectly reporting. I'm directly reporting his thoughts, but I don't need italics. I don't need he thought. I don't need quotation marks because his voice takes on the voice of the narrator. So we get the best of both worlds because first person, the reason why we like to use first person is because that depth and intimacy with the character. But some stories don't work very well with first person. You need to do third person, but with free and direct speech, you can still have that depth and intimacy because it's the voice of the narrator. Like the character takes on the voice of the narrator. Now let's go on to why you want to use it. I kind of already mentioned that it declutters it. You don't have to have italics. You don't have to have thought tags. It just blends seamlessly into the narration. If you have a high tension scene, I don't want to have he thought, she thought going on. I don't want to read that all the time, and I don't want to have a ton of italics. So you can ditch the tags, you can ditch the italics, and you can just focus purely on character intimacy with free and direct speech. So we've got narrative distance. And for those of you who don't know what narrative distance is, it's how close you are to the character. And free and direct speech is a way you can play with narrative distance. So let's look at some examples here of going from a wide narrative distance to a very narrow narrative distance. Okay. The widest distance is like your omniscient point of view, okay? A woman rushed into the office building as the hail beat down on her. We don't know anything about the character. This is just some unknown narrator with a bird's eye view telling us that she's running somewhere into a building, and they can report on that. We're not feeling any sort of intimacy with her. That is okay. You do not want to be intimate with the character 24/7. It is okay to sometimes have a wide distance. Now we move into where not as wide of a distance. A woman looking haggard closed her car door and rushed into the office as the hail beat down on her. Still, an outside narrator reporting what they see. They can report that she looks haggard, but now we have that detail about her. We have more information about her. We're getting closer to the character, but we're not really intimate with her. It's still that bird's eye view. Now, a medium narrow distance. Kayla Ernestine rushed into the office building, another day at a job she hated. We now know her name, and we know she hates her job. And this is not something view could tell us. Like this is a narrator getting into her head to know that she hates her job. But it's still reporting that she hates her job. Now we close the distance and now we're very intimate because we're going to get it reported in the character's words herself. But without italics and without she thought, because we're doing it with free and direct speech, which means we keep it in third person. Of course it was hailing again. Why did she stay in this horrible city working at her unfulfilling job? She knew why, but still, why? Even the door into the office posed another obstacle. The dang door should just open with a keycard or a code. But nope, multiple times a day she struggled with the door. Okay, now we know she hates her job and we're getting it through her voice. We're now in our character's thoughts expressed in her voice. So this is free and direct speech, and it's getting us that deep character interiority that first person can give us, but doing it in third person and doing it without the declutter of thought tags and italicized. I use it most often to fix info dumping. If you do not know what info dumping is, that is when an author just starts to tell us a bunch of information we need to know. If you add in a very long info dump of just telling information, it is literally all told, nothing is shown, it can slow down the experience for the reader and pull them out of the book. Because they're reading along, they've got the action, they're immersed, and now all of a sudden they're just being dumped like a report of information. Sometimes authors do this and the information isn't actually even needed. Other times it's needed information, but they could easily integrate that information into action through free and direct speech. Another time I like to use this is when we're constantly directly reporting thoughts. Switch those directly reported thoughts to free and direct speech.